already hear the backlash that I'm going to get for this video, but quite frankly, I don't really care. This is Goldeneye 007 for the Nintendo 64. Man, I think this game is highly overrated. That doesn't mean it's bad necessarily, it's just that people hold it to a really high standard that I don't think it should be held up to. Especially with how bad it's aging recently, I think it might be a good time to look back at Goldeneye 007. I want to talk a little history first. This game was developed by Rare Studios, who has a pretty good track record of a bunch of games that I'll talk about later in the future sometime. Obviously, it's based on the James Bond movie of the same name, Goldeneye, released in 1995. The game was released for the Nintendo 64 in August of 1997. You take control of James Bond as he fights to prevent a criminal syndicate from using a satellite weapon against London to cause a global financial meltdown. Pretty interesting stuff, I know. The game was a technical masterpiece for the Nintendo 64. It proved that consoles were now powerful enough to handle first-person shooters. Also, the controller, while is not my favorite, does have an analog stick, which makes it a lot easier to aim in games like this. At the time, the game was amazing. No one had ever seen split-screen multiplayer on a console like this before. It was revolutionary for the time. But with all that being said, I still think this game is highly overrated. If you go to a lot of video game forums or video game sites with a bunch of lists, they often list Goldeneye 007 as one of the top 10 games of all time. Yes, the game is fun with friends, but the whole experience is bogged down by frame rate issues, the single player campaign which is very maze-like, and the fact that it's more like Doom and not James Bond, which I know for the time would have been difficult to have more stealth elements in a game like this, but come on, even the original Medal of Honor did stealth better than this. Back when I was about 10 to 13 years old, I played this game non-stop. I played the campaign all the time and the multiplayer too. When I was younger, I didn't mind the frame rate problems, the controls, the missions themselves, and the god-awful AI. But as I grew older, I got more frustrated with the game and eventually stopped playing it entirely. Which is really disappointing because this game can be fun, especially with friends. But solo, I just don't find it that much fun anymore. One thing that I thought was really cool about the single player campaign was that your objectives would change on what difficulty you were on. So if you're on the lowest difficulty, you didn't have as many objectives to complete, which makes it running through some of the levels like a breeze. In order to unlock new levels, you have to complete all the objectives for the certain level that you're on. If you don't, you fail the mission and have to do it again. Don't get me wrong, some of these levels can be really hard, especially when you unlock the later ones, but let me tell you, they're a lot of fun too. Despite the fact that I'm ragging on it a lot, I do still like the single player campaign. I just think it's not as good as people say it is. There's a lot of great moments in the single player campaign. My favorite moment is probably at the very beginning when James Bond jumps off the dam in the very first level. It just felt so awesome to see that happening, especially for such a young kid. It felt like something that would actually happen in the James Bond movies. Some of the levels are very open-ended, which is really awesome, because I love exploring some of these levels, like the one in the snow, the bunker one, the jungle one. Of course, I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but I just remember them because of just what they looked like. But also, I mentioned earlier that some of them are very maze-like, and it's very easy to get lost in some of these, especially in some of the multiplayer maps, but I'll talk about those in a minute. One thing that is really awesome about this game is the animations. I love the ways the characters react when they get shot. You know, if they get shot in the arm, they react to it like that. If they get shot in the balls, yeah, they react to that too, which is really funny to me. Man, it's just those small details that always put me in a good mood. Enough about single player. It's time for the main event, multiplayer. The main reason why most people played Goldeneye 007 in the first place. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to record 4 of us playing the game, so I just had to have one friend over and we played it. Sorry, Internet, but you're not going to get your nostalgia here. Because I have a big problem with multiplayer. Sure, it's fun, and yeah, it's still very solid, but there are just minor problems that just kind of ruin the whole thing, which shouldn't happen. For one, the frame rate drops dramatically. There is so much slowdown in multiplayer. Especially when there's like an explosion going off, it just slows the game down so badly, especially when there's 4 people on screen. It makes modes like rockets just feel completely unplayable at times. Playing multiplayer feels very clunky. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you've played it, you probably know what I'm talking about. Aiming in this game is very difficult. Movement in this game can sometimes be altered, especially when there's stairs, because your character looks up and it just kind of awkwardly looks up. And the maps are just so confusing. Famous maps like Facility and Temple have no indication what floor you're on. It is very confusing to tell what floor you're on, or even if someone's above you or below you. I blame that on the mini-map, but honestly, you're better off just screen cheating at this point. It's not very hard to tell that this was tacked on at the end, and that's exactly what happened. But you know what? Yeah, there may be a lot of issues with it, but you can't deny the fun factor to it, especially when you got 4 people yelling at each other in the same room and bashing each other's heads in with a controller. Good fun. For the most part, the controls are pretty smooth. You look around and move forward and backwards using the analog thumbstick, and you can either use the D-pad or the C buttons to strafe. You can also manually aim using the right shoulder button, but honestly I wouldn't recommend it. It is very tough to aim in this game because maybe it's due to age, but the analog thumbstick is not that great of a thumbstick anyways. There's no rubber and your finger slips off of it constantly. If I were you, I would just use the auto aim instead. Yeah, you don't do as much damage as you do with headshots, but hey, maybe you get lucky sometimes. Overall, I find Goldeneye to be a highly overrated game. It's not bad, but there's just a lot of problems that I think need to be addressed. I don't hate this game because I still have a lot of nostalgic feel for it. And I think that's what a lot of people have get in their way is nostalgia. And to those people who still feed off the nostalgia, that's cool, dude. But I think you should take a look at it from an objective standpoint, not from one that you just enjoyed from your childhood, because every game has flaws, and that's something that we're just going to have to live with. If you stuck around for this long into the video, I thank you very much for watching. It's always a pleasure to upload new content, and I hope you really enjoy it. I will see you guys in another video.